Sorry. All right, guys. So, some issues that I have to remind everyone today. So, this workshop, this webinar is going to be recorded, and as usual, if you've registered via our website, you will get the email as soon as I upload the video to the library. You will also have to take a short test because it's a webinar, and in order to get your certificate, you're going to be tested. So listen attentively, be active, participate, ask questions. And after you take a short test, you will be able to download your certificate, share it on Facebook, Instagram, and just feel happy about another achievement that you get today and the knowledge you get today. So I'm excited to introduce Chris. I haven't seen for a long time, actually. Somewhere in the spring, and we are starting. I'm really happy that we are starting this new season of webinars with Chris. And Chris is a teacher trainer, and academic manager who's trained teachers from over 20 countries, and he regularly presents at conferences across Europe. And Chris is also a CELTA and Delta Module 1 tutor, and this course we are going to talk about today a bit later, and I think Chris is going to mention it many times during the webinar today. Chris is also a published materials writer, and we are going to talk about a really interesting topic about breaking rules in English language teaching, because as we proceed in our careers, we learn certain rules, right? Like on CELTA courses, I remember we were taught to ask CCQs and ICQs and all the things like that. They are golden rules that we have to remember. But there is a challenge, and Chris, he will challenge some of these rules and show you how we can adapt, them better to support our students. So let's give a warm welcome to Chris, and it's your time to shine, and I will return at the end of the webinar, so please don't leave. I'm here to support the chat, and I'm also here to help if you have any issues. I hope you will not. And let's all, everyone, let's enjoy this hour that we will have with Chris.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction, Yulia. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Can everyone see it okay? You can let me know in the chat. Looks like it's coming through. Okay, fantastic. So like Yulia was saying, today's talk was titled The Rules You're Meant to Break, the idea of moving deeper into ELT. So today, what we're really going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at many of these things that we learn very early in our careers and looking at them a little bit more closely. Now, today's session is going to be a little bit different from usual in that I'm going to be talking very little about my own experience today. I will be talking about my experience at times when it's relevant, but rather than talking about my experience and what I've seen, we're going to be having a look at what the research says and some more kind of scientific ways of knowing, or some scientific ways that we found out more about these different areas and issues. In the session today, I'm not going to be talking about anything as being air quote unquote good or bad or the right way or the wrong way. We're going to be thinking about it more of, okay, if something's good, who is it good for? If something's bad, maybe who is it not suitable for? So not should we do this or should we do or should we not do this, but maybe answering the question, when might we do this and when might we not do this? So for this, we're going to be looking at a few golden truths today. So today's golden rules are going to be first, you should grade your language when interacting with students. That you should ask instruction checking questions to make sure that learners know what to do. I know many of us would have learned this on a CELTA course or working with a head teacher. If you're not sure what these things are, that's fine. We will talk about them later. You should do something called grading the task, not the text, that messing with text is bad and evil. and that you should give controlled practice before freer practice, particularly when talking about something like learning grammar. They have to go from a simpler exercise to a harder exercise. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. Now, as we're going through today, feel free to drop a question in the chat at any time, because I reckon there may be some questions. And I'm also looking to maybe be a little bit provocative with some of the points that I'm making. So if something sounds a little bit interesting, or you want to find out more about it, feel free to drop the question in the chat. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at today is this idea of you should grade your language. This is something that we very often tell to new teachers or people who are beginning, for example, a CELTA course, where we say that they need to be careful with how they speak to students. So first, in case any of us are kind of not aware, let's think, okay, what is language grading? I'm going to show you some instructions that a teacher might give a class for an activity. Just let me know in the chat, what do you think the problem could be if a teacher gave these instructions to, say, an elementary or pre-intermediate level class? Here you go. People are already identifying several issues, really getting to this point, exactly like Valeria is saying, that really this is probably going to confuse a lot of students, especially weaker students. So the answer to this, what we learn on teacher training courses, is that we would simplify our language to make it more accessible for the students. So cutting out things like, so the thing is, I have a new activity. What I'm going to ask you to do is just, okay, everyone, stand up. We're going to do a survey today. If they know what a survey is, that will be a fine instruction. If they don't know what a survey is, you might have to go even simpler, but simplifying it. And when we talk about simplifying the language for teaching purposes, we're really thinking about making sure that learners understand us. Absolutely fine. No one's complaining. We could even look at things like grading our grammar, picking simpler structures. We could look at grading sounds, so maybe disconnecting our connected speech, avoiding contracted forms or weak forms, things like that. We could include more stresses in the sentence to make it easier for the students. We could think about how we're breaking down the information. You know, if you're giving clear instructions, probably past perfect is not a great idea. Anything that would make you tell the story or tell the instructions out of order. We could talk about speed of delivery, avoiding, we could say, discoursal features, so avoiding things like overly polite register in favor of maybe something short, like a short imperative. All these polite structures. Would you be so kind as to possibly, maybe, if you wouldn't mind so terribly, at lower levels, especially students won't understand. Complexity, like we said, short and sweet, and also quantity, maybe sharing a bit less of what to do. So then the question becomes, all of this sounds like a good thing. We want students to understand what we're saying. So why would we not grade our language? Well, Scrivener, in one of his books on classroom management, actually talks about language grading not as a yes or no thing, but as a spectrum. That, well, we might highly grade our language, the kind of thing that I was talking about before. Stand up, sit down, stand up, take your paper, ask questions. If yes, write the name. That might not always be necessary for all classes. Especially if you've been teaching a class for some time, it's probably not a requirement. We could also talk at the class average level, which is what we kind of assume to be the current level of the whole class if we're working with students who have been placement tested and are put in groups of like level. But we could go further. We could go to what we might call a +1, which is a little bit above their level. Or we could sometimes go to a challenging level of language, which might push them even more, or even slowly going to how we might speak in the real world to a fully ungraded kind of language. So why would we do this? Why wouldn't we, if we want the whole class to understand, why not hang out somewhere around here? Well, let's look at some examples. I'm going to show us three things. One's going to be something a student will say. In the middle column, you'll see a graded teacher response. That is a highly graded, very simplified way of responding. On the right, you'll see a not completely ungraded, but let's say a less graded version. What we're interested in, we want to know where are the learning opportunities in the less graded exchanges compared to the graded exchanges. What opportunities would there be for learning or teaching, assuming that we are ready to deal with them? So if we look at the first one, what might the students notice, or what could we highlight or pay attention to in the ungraded response? What might be interesting for the students there? You can type your ideas in the chat. You're right, they may not know the modals of deduction, but they'll probably get what you mean if in this context, look, 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 my parents gave me a new phone. Oh, wow, you're thrilled. Probably most students would be able to get that from the context. Irina's saying how to react, this functional language, these reply questions. Oh, did they? Giving them exposure to this, what we might call back channeling language. So we've also got kind of this more natural pattern of, oh, did they back channel, followed by our modal. You must have been thrilled. You must have been excited. You must have been happy. You must have been terrified. You must have been. They don't have to know the full system of modals of deduction to get that chunk of you must have been. So here we've got kind of a small learnable chunk of language. Let's look at the next one. So our students finished explaining their ideas. We want to praise them. What could they learn from this response? Yeah, so we've got prompting further discussion, more language. They might say, teach, especially if you have a good relationship with them, they might say, teacher, teacher, what's insightful? Brilliant. Fantastic. I would want a student to ask me that question because now we've got a chance to add something more, to add a teachable moment. If it's a struggling student who's barely keeping up, probably we don't want to do this, but especially for maybe a stronger student, this could act as a form of differentiation, give them something extra. They might be able to pick it up just from the context. They might know, so, okay, side, insight, okay, insightful, they might be able to work it out to some degree. So let's look at the last one. We've got a student talking about the favorite city they've ever visited, which is Prague. What could they learn here that they wouldn't get in the ungraded response? Yeah, take two. That's the big one, this phrasal, this exposure to these phrasal verbs and vocabulary. Again, the meaning of take two is probably quite clear here. They've just told me why they love Prague, and I say, well, why did you Prague so much? They'll probably get that take two means like in a way that might be more difficult to get without the context. So additional exposure to this more advanced language. Again, if we've got students who are struggling or at lower levels, maybe this is not so great. Maybe at higher levels or with stronger or more confident or more curious students who don't mind a bit of a challenge, this could be a way of giving them that little bit extra in the lesson. So this actually gets to what Dr. Stephen Krashen referred to as comprehensible input, the sort of I+1. What Dr. Krashen argued was that one of the main drivers by which we learn language is being exposed to language which we can understand, but which is one step higher than what we could produce. If my student can say this, probably they can also say this. This is unlikely to be their I+1. Could be, absolutely. It's unlikely. I would argue. This, I think, is much more likely to be that +1. In the context, they'll probably understand it, but they probably wouldn't say it that way. We can use this to build activities. So one of the ways that we might make the use of comprehensible input or making or exploiting our less graded language is teaching students a series of steps, what to do when they encounter it. This is one of my personal favorite frameworks, and this comes from Meddings and Thornberry's Teaching Unplugged. And they proposed the 7 R's. I think there might be another R that I didn't include, but at the very least, there are 7 R's at least, where they talk about the importance of recording it, get them to pay attention to it, write down what they think they heard, even if they're not sure. Because if they write something close, you can probably work back to what it was that you said. Book margins are wonderful for this. Get them to write up in the corners and down the sides and in the bottoms. They're not going to interfere with what they do. Normally, if they're online, have them keep just a Word document open where they can just quickly drop it in. Make sure that students remember it. If you noticed that you used kind of a clever word or you were making an effort to do that, sending them things in the chat like this could prompt them to remember what it was that you said. Now, is this something we might always plan on doing? Not necessarily. This is, in my view, something a bit more opportunistic, that we would do it when the opportunity arises. But sometimes the opportunity arises. From there, once they've noticed it and once they've got a record of it, we can do things like get them to repeat it, report it. Maybe they've learned something new while studying. Could be, what are some new words that you learned from your teacher this week? Doesn't have to be only in one lesson, but getting them to think back and reflect on their own learning. And then incorporate this into your recycling and revision. The last thing is to, well, of course, reward the learner's efforts to take on the new language they've noticed. And this is a really important thing. People do what you praise them for. People do what you reward them for. So if you notice if the students are asking you questions about, teacher, what's take two? Teacher, what's insightful? Don't think, oh, you idiot, I'm giving instructions, shut up. I know it's hard some days, especially when you've been teaching for 5 hours straight. And yeah, I know. But praise them, saying, insightful, yeah, good job for noticing. Insightful, it means that you've made some new or interesting point. Great job for asking. An activity based on this principle of I+1 would be something simple like an upgrade dictation. One way we can do an upgrade dictation is that, well, We start off with what we might call standard delayed error correction. While the students are working on an activity, we lay back, we listen to them, and we listen for language. For this activity, we don't need them to make mistakes, but we want language where maybe they could be a bit more adventurous. It often happens in intermediate level classes. They like to use very basic language and they don't like to take risks. Towards the end of the lesson or activity, as you prefer, think about, you'll pick some of the phrases that you think could be upgraded. I like to pick on these, what I call crutch words. Words like good, interesting, fun, kind of bad. These lower level adjectives or words that maybe could be a bit more precise. Then put them up on the board, ask the learners how they could do them in a different way. You can put them on the board, fine-tuning them, so correcting anything. If you say fun and they go, it was fun, it was excited. Okay, exciting, yeah, ing for situations, whatever correction we need to do. They get them to take out a pen. Dictate your own upgrades at a natural pace. Try to pick something different from what they've done. This is easier to do at lower levels. At higher levels, getting different from what they've done can be a little bit tricky, but it does get easier with practice. And then elicit your own upgrades. Afterwards, we want them to do something with the language. We want them to repeat it in some way, but not just drilling. Maybe get them to make up their own new sentences with the items at a minimum. Yeah, not always very communicative, but we can add some details on, make the sentences true for you, things like that. Or maybe get them to compare and contrast the new version and the original. Are they exactly the same? For example, maybe one of them is stronger than the other. Maybe one of them's more formal than the other. Maybe one is more likely to be used by someone of a higher social class rather than a lower social class. Or repeat the task, but use the upgraded language this time. This works well, especially for shorter activities, which they could repeat in a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something that won't take like 10 minutes to do all over again. So this is one way that we could go with language grading. So the idea here being that language grading is not bad. Very often it's extremely necessary, but there might be times and places and reasons why we don't. And this is going to be the theme today. Which means we're going to get to the other thing, something many people noticed with the instructions earlier. We're going to be looking at instruction checking questions that look at that check that learners know what to do. One of the things that we often learn on CELTA courses is that after you give instructions, you ask the learners questions. Do you work alone or with a partner? Do you write full sentences or short notes? Do you need to change the verbs to a different form? Things like this. Again, these can be very helpful. Examples of ICQs could be from mingle activity. Things like, do you talk to one person or many people? Kind of necessary. If learners have never done a mingle before, they might not know. They might think I just talked to one person. Or they could be a group of teenagers and you want to remind them that they need to talk to different people or they'll just stand there talking with their best friend. So could be. In a writing activity, things like how many paragraphs do you need? A grammar activity, what tenses do you need to use? Reminding them to focus on maybe a particular aspect of language, and these are generally fine. Which gets us to our question. Well, not all ICQs are created equal. Some are condescending, and by the way, every ICQ you're about to see is a real ICQ, which I have either asked or heard. I'm not going to tell you which is which to save myself embarrassment. Do you talk to yourself or to your partner? Probably not very helpful in checking instructions. Others also may not be particularly helpful. Do you read alone or with a partner? Well, I've only got one set of eyes. I can't borrow my partner's. How much time do you have? Teacher, as much time as you give us. Teacher can say 3 minutes, but teacher may decide we need 5. Okay. Not saying that it's not important for students to know how much time they have, but maybe as an ICQ, unless it's really relevant, like it's a very short amount of time, it may not always be helpful. They may not give you an accurate impression of if the class as a whole understood what to do, because very often the strongest students will shout out the answers, which is a problem because the strongest students were the ones you probably weren't that worried about. And perhaps most importantly, ICQs often focus on what to do, very often not how to do it. And in my experience, students usually understand what to do. It's usually how that they tend to struggle with. So, okay, ICQs, a good tool, not a perfect tool. What could we do with them? What could we do instead? Well, one idea is, well, sorry, before we look at why, we also need to look at one very important thing, which is something we call cognitive load theory. So that is how many things do I have to keep in my brain at once? And they also point to what can be a big problem with ICQs. When we think about setting up an activity, one of the reasons that people struggle sometimes is they get a bit overloaded. Well, what kinds of overload can we cause? Well, one is what's referred to as intrinsic load. Now, this means how much background knowledge do the students have? Are learners familiar with this task? Have they done activities like this before? Is it a routine for them? If not, they're going to need a lot of brain power just to understand what's going on if it's a completely new task for them. When we add to this, we have what's called the extraneous load. This is on top of the thing that I'm trying to understand, what extra information is there? Very often, additional questions for a student who's already lost because I'm looking at this activity and the teacher's demonstrated it twice and I don't know what to do. And now they're asking me questions and I've got to answer them. And oh crap, is it is or are? Adding the pressure. And well, the last one in general, do the students have the language they need to cope with the task? Now, again, not saying ICQs are bad. They're extremely helpful when used well. But we might need some other tools in addition. One tool which is very, very helpful is working an example together. Worked examples have several benefits over just using ICQs. They tend to be more informative. They're a bit easier to follow for the students because they go one step at a time, and these help the learners to be more successful. Moreover, working an example together with the students, even if you don't highlight it clearly, as long as you go through it slowly enough and they can follow you, is going to show them how you want them to do it. That is, it'll promote an effective learning strategy. Even better if you highlight this for them. Maybe this way by using ICQs. What did we do first? What did we do second? What did we do third? An activity that I'm very fond of, and so are some of my students, it's what we call cheating. Here, you can see a task from Cambridge exams. This particular activity comes from the C1 Advanced exam. In it, students are given a text with paragraphs removed. They have to put the paragraphs back in the right spot. And for many people who do the C1 Advanced or the CAE exam, they feel that it's one of the hardest reading activities, if not the hardest, because they very often feel a bit lost. Now, asking a lot of ICQs is probably not going to help them do this task better. So instead, we're going to follow a few steps. First, if it's a new type of activity, what we might do instead is tell them the answer to number one. We're cheating. Let's just go full out. Cheat. Give them the answers. Why not? They'll be pretty shocked by this, especially if you don't do it very much. Teenagers tend to like it, though. Then put them into pairs or groups of three and ask them to try to prove that the answer is correct in as many ways as they can. We're giving them the end point. The answer is A. We're asking them to work backwards. You know the answer is A. Why? By doing this, they're going to find the reasoning why the answer is A. Hopefully. Usually they do this pretty successfully. When the students are ready, elicit all the different ways the learners knew the answer was correct onto the board. From there, you have a checklist, or depending on how things go, a series of steps where you can elicit from learners how they think they should go about doing the task. We've got the students engaged, paying attention, and we've brought them along the process with us. Now they know what to do, they know how to do it. Now that they've done that, we turn them loose onto the activity. Now, again, is this something you do all the time? Maybe no, but for a new activity, this is something which I found to be quite helpful, especially in more complicated activities like putting paragraphs back. So it's very useful when I found for exam preparation in general for B1 preliminary, FC, and anything where the students might get a bit overwhelmed by a series of steps. They may not know what to do. The takeaway from this is that good instructions don't just tell the students what to do, they make the process of doing the task more manageable, something we call scaffolding. Just telling people what to do is often not enough for this, especially if it's that first category of task which they're not familiar with and which they've never done before. So we've looked at 2 myths. We're going to look at number 3. One of my personal favorites. You should grade the task, not the text. So what do we mean by this? We mean that you shouldn't, if you give students a text, especially one which is authentic, you should not simplify it. You should just give the students a simpler task to do with it. Let them be exposed to authentic text. And there are lots of reasons for this. Authentic text has a lot of benefits. Authentic texts can build confidence. Students know, okay, I can read stuff in the real world. I can do more than just what's in my course book. Okay, that's good. They can expose students to a variety of text types. Often what we see in textbooks is very samey, lots of magazine articles and stories and things like this. We don't see a lot of recipes, and we don't see a lot of weather reports, and we don't see a lot of these little things that we don't see a lot of horoscopes in English textbooks. They can very often be good at ways of exposing learners to lots of natural language, especially collocations or accents that could be helpful at higher levels. They can provide a lot of cultural insights, very often which are taken out of course books, especially those designed for an international market, because these very often try to avoid issues like politics or religion or cross-cultural conflict that could be a bit too, let's say, spicy for the global market. But you might find these in authentic materials in a way that's appropriate for your class. And these might be particularly relevant for students who study in English for academic purposes or English for specific purposes, pilots or bankers or accountants or programmers who might need to work with very specific documents and might need to know exactly what they're going to work with in the real world. And well, they can be built on with more or less authentic tasks, which reflect the purpose of using them in the real world, sometimes in a way which isn't always possible with textbooks. And like we said before, there's a wide variety of types of authentic text, from online shopping to online exercise classes for people interested in fitness, to board games, to weather reports, to even things like tours and hiking trips. Even art can sometimes in its own way be an authentic text. So I've only said good things about authentic text. What's the problem? Well, it's not all perfect. One is that students, especially those at lower levels or who are less confident, have been found to be less motivated by these materials than by course books. That's why there's a very interesting bit of research on listening comprehension done by Richard Caldwell, where he looks at people's reactions to not understanding. And the students very often want to feel like they understand. When the teacher says, don't worry, just answer the questions. It's okay if you didn't understand everything. Very often the students think, yeah, but I want to. I want to feel like I understood what I've just heard. Um, so this can be kind of a point of conflict. Doesn't mean the students are right, but it means they have feelings about things, and those could in turn affect how motivated they are to participate in class. Materials need to have the potential to stimulate communication or engagement. Um, there's not often a lot to say about a weather report, although you can design some engaging tasks with it. For example, design an evening. If the weather is right, what would you do? If the weather's wrong, what would you do? There's things you can do, plan a weekend, etc. But if the students have had trouble understanding the text, it's very unlikely that they'll be able to get much meaningful communication or engagement from it if they've had a low level of comprehension, even if they've performed well in our task. Chavez asks if a text is still authentic if we're using it in a context it was never intended for. If I take a weather report that was intended to tell people about the weather this weekend and I use it for English teaching, he asks, is it even still authentic? Which is maybe its own kind of question. Authentic materials may also not be very learnable. They might contain, let's say that we wanted to help use authentic materials to help learners notice a certain structure or a certain theme. There might be very few examples of that structure, and they might not occur very commonly or with enough context or cotext to make the meaning clear. Songs are very guilty of this. When we try to teach grammar through songs, very often the songs are using the grammar to tell the message, and the grammar is what carries that meaning. So there's not much going on around it that makes it easy to decode this meaning from a song, as an example. Again, not always true, but very often true. We might even wonder what constitutes authentic. If we think about exam preparation classes, well, most English exams, like the IELTS, use authentic-ish texts, but then if you're teaching an IELTS class, is it authentic to use authentic text, or is it authentic to use an IELTS text? And is an authentic IELTS text more authentic than an authentic text? And it all gets very confusing very quickly. So what might we do instead? Well, let's think about the other side then. What could be the benefits of grading or simplifying a text, or working with what we might call a semi-authentic text, a text that looks real enough, but might be designed a little bit for teaching? Well, one, it allows us to do something called enriching our input. It allows us to maybe adapt it slightly to put in more examples of what we would want our students to notice, what we might call input flood. We can also help structure it a bit differently so as to encourage discovery or raising awareness of a new theme or topic. It might also reduce the cognitive load. Again, if we want students to notice a new topic or structure or set of lexes, this is going to be a lot easier for them to do if they understand everything else. We're reducing cognitive load. And simplification could allow learners to engage with texts in a much deeper way than they would if we didn't adapt it at all. If the students now have understood enough to communicate about it and have meaningful ideas about it, and we haven't really changed the substance of the article, just made it a bit easier to understand, this could actually lead to more productive work in the classroom afterwards. So let's look at some examples of what kind of input we might consider and different levels of grading that we might look at. Here's an example from Rod Ellis, where he's taken a short article about Alzheimer's and he's graded it quite a bit. Have a look, or let me know in the chat, what do you think he's focusing on here? What does he want the students to notice? Yeah, absolutely. We've got modals there, modals of possibility, modals of probability. So here, we've got a very graded kind of input, but it's also very simplified, and it also lets the students more easily notice this language. The content about Alzheimer's is still there. We could get the students to react to it, express their feelings about it, which could generate some very genuine feelings or emotions in some students, especially if this is a sensitive topic for them. But it also is now easier for the students to notice the language. We could go one step slightly differently. Using similarly graded activities, things like a consciousness raising activity. Here you've got several book reviews where the students need to listen and write in the word who and whose. Then they practice uncoupling the sentences and finally think about when do I use who and when do I use whose, helping the students notice the difference. These are all quite graded. We could go with something a bit less graded. Here you've got an example from Scott Thornberry. Well, he looks at a newspaper article, and this newspaper article looks a bit more believable. It's got a title, it looks newspapery, the language is appropriate for a newspaper. It looks like something you might realistically expect to find, only it's been simplified for teaching a little bit, and some structures have been added so that students can more easily notice them, especially this use of past perfect and past perfect continuous, which means that when he sets his task of put the events in order, there's now something that he can use to highlight the meaning. So this is all to say that, well, while authentic text is good, we still need graded text for teaching sometimes. So what are the points that we need to bear in mind is that, one, it's not yes or no. There is a spectrum. It could be completely authentic, it could be mostly authentic, it could be semi-authentic, or we could go all the way to the graded activities like we've got here, depending on what's going to be best today for our students. What can they engage with in a meaningful way the best? One concept which I was exposed to a little while ago in this article by Guartino and Morley, they have this concept that I really, really like, which is this idea of authenticity of response. Not just is the text authentic, but can the students respond to the text in a way which is real and authentic and memorable or emotional? Can they really have some sort of experience with it? Or is it another one of those, okay, horsebook texts? I read it. If you asked me in 10 minutes what it was about, I won't remember because I didn't care the first time I read it. Of course, modern course books are much better about this than they used to be, but especially if you look at course books from 10, 15 years ago, this is a very big issue, these forgettable texts. And maybe the most important question, will the students want to respond in a memorable, emotional, or in an interesting way? Are we getting this emotional response from the students? If we do use authentic text, we need to think very carefully about how we're going to support learners in its comprehension and feeling confident leaving what they're doing. We want to avoid the situation where they say, teacher, teacher, I don't get it. And we say, it's okay, you don't need to. And they say, but teacher, teacher, I want to. We don't want this conflict. So we want them to leave feeling successful. That could involve thinking carefully about how we're setting the activity, setting their expectations. Okay, class, we're going to work with this text and it's going to be really hard. It's authentic. It's really like from the news today. So today we're going to do a task, but we're going to set our expectations appropriately. If we can do better than, if you feel like you got 30%, you're doing fantastic. Okay, now I know that that's where I should be. We're not telling them this is easy or this is hard, so whatever. We're letting them know where their expectations should be. If there's a problem with motivation, again, might not be necessary for all students, could be helpful for some. The last one that we're going to look at is one which we talk quite a bit about on some courses, like the Delta Module 1, which is that you should give controlled practice before freer practice. Well, in other words, we should give simpler, easier exercises before we move on to harder, more complicated exercises. And why is this important? Well, people argue that it helps learners memorize form, they can practice verb forms, word order, things like this. We can check that students have learned what we've taught them. If we've just spent some time helping learners understand the present perfect, we can give them a gap fill and check how are they doing with present perfect. It gives very intensive repetitive practice, which isn't always possible with discussions or oral activities or writing activities. It really lets us focus in on one topic. Could help us focus on other aspects as well, such as pronunciation, and, well, generally makes learners feel more confident, especially if they do well at it. So, what's the catch? What's the problem? Well, we could run into an issue with readiness. Just because I'm teaching a lesson on the present perfect doesn't mean that all of my students are ready to learn the present perfect. And that's a really big issue if you, like me, teach mixed ability groups, where some of your learners are going to be ready for it, but some of them, they're not yet. So they're kind of excluded from this part of the lesson. It's too difficult for them. They basically have to try their best, but sit out and hopefully be quiet while their peers who are further along do the work. That can sometimes lead to a lot of discussion about language, especially when we get into these long checking the answers and explaining the answers that take 10, 15, 20 minutes, but much less discussion using the language. If we use a restaurant analogy, we spend a lot of time eating the bread, but we spend very little time eating the entree. Noonan phrases this as such that we place an emphasis on talking about the language rather than being communicative. Examples in control practice tasks are often decontextualized and not connected with later productive activities, which means that they might not actually prepare students that well for what's coming next. Ideally, the control practice should be a simplified version of whatever they're going to do for freer practice. In many course books, that's not the case. We expect them to go from filling in gaps in random sentences to, okay, now talk about life. We often need something more to bridge that gap. Again, too much cognitive load? Are we maybe overloading them with excessive transformations and things like that, when maybe if they just had to go and use the language, it would be much easier for them? So what are some alternatives to this? I'm going to show you some activities from recent lessons of mine. One is this. This was taken from a CPE level lesson, a C2 lesson. We were working on letter writing and using a range of language and letters. What the students needed to do was take these random words and put them together to make a letter about a community project, to make 2 paragraphs. Now, they had the first paragraph and they had the last paragraph, so they knew what it was about. They just needed to use these to connect their ideas. While they were working, I was working with them, moving between the groups, helping them when they got stuck. So it's quite a meaty, lengthy activity, but it's also a C2 level class. Obviously, in lower level classes, a simplified version, which is maybe only 4 sentences long, 5 sentences long, could work. What we wound up making was this. This was the text which my students came up with. And once they had their text, we compared it with the answer key and asked them to go through and highlight any differences. Now, again, we know this is right because we were correcting as we went along and we were helping and fixing little mistakes and things like this. We know there's no mistakes here, at least none that I found in the lesson. If you look very attentively, you might find a couple. But then we get the chance to compare another way to do it. Oh, that's an interesting word. I might not have used that. Oh, gain allotment space. Teacher, what's allotment space? Unable to find green space, improving relations. So a chance to notice new language, which helps people learn. Now, this is higher levels, but we could do the same thing at lower levels. Here, you can see materials from a YL lesson that I taught very recently for preparation for A2 Key for Schools. Here, you can see, well, in this exam, they need to tell a story from pictures. Here, we gave them some words they could use, they matched them to the pictures, and we got them to write the story. No teaching, no nothing. Here are the words you need, go. We did remind them some things they needed to do, and we gave them some self-assessment to check that they'd done it. But once they were ready, we gave them the teacher's story. And in the teacher's story, we got them to do the same. Get them to compare, highlight the differences, find any words that are interesting, and focus on how, in this case, linkers of sequence were used. So we're going from general production to something more specific. This also meant that the students who were at different levels, they could all do this. They could all make an attempt here, and they could all do something and get some feedback and have the teacher come around and help them. And then we could push a little bit further. And even if this was a bit beyond the reach of some students, they've already been able to do this. And they can get some more learning from exposure to this, which they can understand, our I+1 again, before getting them to write another one. A similar activity, or sorry, very different activity, which comes from Thornberry, is about awareness raising. So here you're not really going to see controlled or freer practice. It's just going to be a bit different. Here, we've got a lesson on modals of obligation. Here we've got true-false sentences, where the students need to go through and probably guess, play a little game, find out, or make their guesses and then go online, go on the internet to find out the truth. When I've run this activity in lessons, we've typically done this, checked true or false, and then I turn them loose with the internet to correct the false sentences so that they're true. But before we do, we have an opportunity to talk about something. We have an opportunity to talk about our modals of obligation. So they do this, they get the clarification, then the practice is correcting and eventually writing their own true-false quiz. But right from the start of the lesson, they're working with the language. And if they don't understand, don't have to, this will become very apparent when they start discussing it with a partner. They learn it through doing it. And then we get to a more concentrated focus on form. Then we can move on to further practice here, more statements, additional practice for them to go through, again, with rather meaty topics. So this gets us to a point that we can really focus on form whenever we want. We don't necessarily have to focus on it before they do the discussion. They don't necessarily need controlled practice before. We could focus on accuracy during, and we can even sometimes focus on accuracy after. So how do we know when? Well, if it's before, one necessary consideration is, did the students have the necessary language to even attempt the task? If I want the students to tell a story using the past, and they've never studied the past and they don't know anything about it, I'm going to have to teach that first. In that case, probably we want controlled practice on the front end. During the task, well, does the task enable this? Are the students going to be working for a longer period of time where you'll have a chance to go around and work with people? Are there opportunities for them to try again after receiving feedback? For example, here, this is a time-consuming activity, 20-ish minutes. There's lots of time. If we talk about something here, they get lots of opportunities to use it further. In a shorter activity, maybe that won't be as possible. Post-task, is there a meatier focus on language to be had? Or are there ways to extend the original task in writing, speaking, speaking, or writing? So for example, here, are these true or false? We can lead into now correct them, now make your own. Where, okay, doing it after working with this initial task may make more sense. They'll get the exposure by doing this. We work with the meanings that when we get to here, everything's clear. They're ready to go. There's no right way, just different things that we might do in different situations. So we've talked about some golden rules today, that we should grade our language, to which we've said maybe. We looked at asking ICQs, to which we said, yeah, sometimes. We've looked at grading tasks, not texts, to which we said, yeah, okay, maybe. And we've looked at controlled practice before freer practice, to which we said, if it works. So we're going to have some time for questions at the end. Before we get to questions, we're going to send through the slides a bit later, but here you can see the list of references for the talk. Before we get to any questions and before I talk about the slide that just popped up, okay, so let's start with questions before we get to my secret slide. We've got time for 2 questions. I'm going to talk about my secret slide, and then we'll have time for a few more questions, I think. While we're thinking about our questions, if you found today interesting, if these are the kinds of questions that you like to examine and that you like to go into a little bit more deeply, what I can recommend is something you might consider is looking at the Cambridge Delta, especially the Delta Module 1 course. We do have a Delta Module 1 course starting very soon. I want to say, Yulia, in 2 weeks?
Yep.
Yep. But we run them twice a year. We run them once in the we run them in the fall and in the spring around the times of the exam. And these are courses where you can work to, well, deepen your knowledge more of ELT methodology and work towards a very highly respected qualification where we work through tricky questions like this. Kind of help us move from experienced to expert. Module 1 is assessed via an exam, which before the session, I looked up the global pass rate. 37% apparently of people in the world fail it when they take it. It's worldwide. And then you can see the rates for pass, merit, and distinction afterwards. We're actually very happy to say that our candidates do much better than that, where we can see we've had a very small amount of fails, I think 1 in the last 4 years, to my knowledge, with our pass rate being, our total pass rate being almost 95%, with almost 40% of our trainees walking away with merits. Something we're all very proud of. So if this is something that you're interested in, it's something I can highly recommend. You can feel free to ask me questions about it or to write to grade, and they'll be happy to let you know about it. Getting to some of the questions that I saw in the chat. Can we do freer practice at the next lesson if we don't have time? Yeah, sometimes it's one lesson's not enough for students to process what they're learning. I think the biggest thing is to think about how you're using the time in the lesson. It's important to ask yourself, did I not get to freer practice today because the students struggled and they needed more time? Or did I not get to freer practice today because I didn't use my time effectively? If the answer is the first one, by all means. There can even be lots of benefits. Maybe if it's a really difficult topic, send them home. Let them do the work in the workbook. Or maybe like Christy's saying that higher levels, B2 plus C1, there might just be a lot to cover and it might be difficult to squeeze that in to one lesson. So yeah, why not? If are the students coping with the activity? Are they doing better than they would have done otherwise? If yes, then cool. What you did worked. Um, and we use pre-teaching for authentic text to help our students. You can. Um, there's an activity that Scott Thornberry recommends in one of his books, which is really helpful as an alternative to pre-teaching. And it's that either before the text or after having them read it for main idea or skimming, scanning, whatever, you would ask them to go through the text and circle any words they don't know. And then, well, let's say circle up to, if you use any words they don't know, you can get into a bit of a mess. Let's say circle up to 8 words you don't know. Pick the 8 most important. This is already building a reading skill because it's getting them to think, okay, which words are the most crucial that I don't understand? And which ones can I kind of sort of work out? Put them in small groups. Simple instruction. If you know the word, tell your partner. If no one knows the word, put a tick next to it. At the end, talk about the words that no one knows. The words that no one knows, there probably will only be 5 or 6 maximum. If the text is well chosen, I would say if you've got more than 5 or 6, you probably picked a text that was too hard. Which we do sometimes. There's nothing wrong with it. Just text was too hard. Better luck next time. So that could be an alternative to pre-teaching. Sometimes it's hard to upgrade language for B2 plus C1 level students. Oh yeah, you're telling me. It's very difficult. What I would do is when you focus on these upgrades, rather than trying to say it in a cleverer way, because yeah, that's hard, especially when you've got a really clever group of C1 students that could really be in a C2 class. Like, what you might focus on instead is rather than upgrading as in making better, think about changing it in some way. So for example, change the register, go from neutral to formal, go from formal to informal, go from neutral to casual or colloquial or slang, or do it only using phrasal verbs. As examples of things that you might do. This is actually going to help you
Раніше
work with
зупинитися за
manipulated
цим перехрестям, десь одразу зміна.
This is going to help you work with the language in a way that doesn't just feel like you have to one up your students, but it's still doing the job of reformulating and getting them to play with language for different purposes and different reasons. And that's also building that language awareness of, okay, what's formal, what's informal? Okay, what's the one synonym? ChatGPT can be reliable. Yeah, why not? Go for it. I love ChatGPT. Use it all the time. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you use it as a tool for critical analysis. So maybe don't just do it and say, here you go, here's your answer key. But maybe do it and say, okay, what do we think about this? Which of these do we like? Do we agree with all of them? Are there any where we can do better? So that critical engagement with what ChatGPT says. And that's also kind of teaching them I would argue, soft skill of technological literacy, which is really important if you work with younger learners like preteens, teenagers. Probably wouldn't be using ChatGPT with primary learners. I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but I personally probably wouldn't think to do it. But early secondary, late secondary could be very useful. Is it possible to take Delta 2 without taking Delta 1 first? Yes, you can do the Delta modules in any order. What some people do is they do Module 2 and then do Module 1. What some people do is they do the Module 1 course, don't take the exam, do Module 2, and then take the exam afterwards. It's very flexible. Whatever fits into your schedule or kind of, it's not a cheap course, so schedule, financial situation, whatever. This is one of the big advantages of the Delta is that it's a very flexible qualification. Any other questions?
When is
When's
this?
the test? Do you mean the Delta Module 1 exam, which is offered in the first week of June and the first week of December every year? It's actually the first Wednesday at 9 a.m. There's some useless ELT pub trivia for you. Unless you decide to take the exam, then it's very necessary. Tori saying no. Okay, fine. I tried. Right. I think in that case, Julia, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Your webinars always make me think about teaching, and they are so thought-provoking. I have many ideas, and thank you for sharing those ideas. I couldn't think about before this time, like doing freer activities, then going back to controlled ones, which is new to me. I would like to remind you that Chris is a course tutor on our Delta Module 1 preparation course, which is going to start just in 2 weeks on September 22nd, and it's going to last for 2 months, actually. From my personal experience, I did the course with grade, but I had another tutor, and it was super helpful. And I've got my Delta Module 1 pass, of course, and you can prepare for the course by yourself, but what tutors do for you, like, it's like the room of chaos. When you enter the room, like your head is the room with chaos, with all the knowledge and skills that you have. But when the tutors come, they put everything on the right shelves, actually, and you feel more confident to pass this exam. And I know that in this course, you will have input sessions with tutors, which I didn't have because this is the new format. We've been practicing it for the second year now with Chris, and Chris is the author actually of this course. When I did the course back in 2019, I didn't have input sessions with the tutor. I only had to read the literature by myself. But then Chris suggested that we have to work with our trainees, and this is super helpful. You've seen the webinars, you now know who is the tutor of the course. You will also have individual consultations. Those are face-to-face meetings with tutors. Of course, everyone is afraid of Delta Module 1s, and this is true. You will have to read a lot. I think even more than a lot. Like you will sleep with books, eat with books, study with books, work with books. Yeah, it's all about reading tons of literature. What I really loved about the course is that there are mock tests in the middle and at the end of the course, and you will get feedback from the tutors. We looked at the different tasks, and when you come to the exam room after taking the course, you really feel confident because you know what you have to do in that room. You just come, you answer all the questions, and actually you get your grade for passing this exam. So Chris and Lida are course tutors at this upcoming course, which starts on September 22. To get more information, you have the link, which is on the QR code that you can scan on the screen, or just go to grade.ua. We have some early bird fee there, so if you hurry up, you might catch the worm actually, and enroll the course. And just remind me, please, Chris, if we have the interview with the course tutor before this course.
Yeah. You'll have a chance to talk with the course tutor. There are some pre-interview tasks. You'll have a chance to sit down with the tutor who's going to tell you about the format of the course, how everything works. You'll probably sit down with me because I wind up doing a lot of the interviews, just because. So yeah, where we'll go through. We even in the interview we even work through one tiny exam task together to give you a feel for what you have to do.
That's something new I didn't have. So our trainees are luckier than I was like a few years ago. Okay, I'm just talking about these dates because it takes some time to do the pre-interview task and then have the interview with the tutor. So 2 weeks looks like it's a long time, but in fact it's a short time, so hurry up. And I have the question from Vera. Should we go abroad for taking the test? Unfortunately, Cambridge suspended exams in Ukraine. But if you're interested, we work with our partner center in Warsaw, in Poland. And if you are interested, our managers can provide you with all the information. Just write to ttc at grade.ua. Or you can choose another center in Romania or Hungary, or
We've
in
always
Poland.
found a center for people. Like anyone who's tried to
Yeah.
take the exam, we've always got a center for them. That's never been
Yes.
an issue that someone was trying to find a center and they just couldn't find one.
And
Yeah.
we have stories of our teachers, of grade teachers who took the test in June and they traveled to another country and actually it was successful. So don't worry about going to a different place. I hope, I'm not sure, like I'm sure we will not have it in December, but we are talking to Cambridge and we would like to bring, and we are doing everything possible to bring back the exams to Ukraine. But unfortunately now we cannot do that. All right, any questions about Delta Module 1? Okay, so thank you very much, then Chris, for the session. Let me remind everyone that you will get the email as soon as I upload the video. It takes some time, so it might not happen today, but tomorrow, 100%. Thank you very much, Chris, for presentation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, teachers, for joining us, and have a nice evening. Good night to Chris and everyone in Ukraine. Have a peaceful evening, and see you at our upcoming events, and see you among our trainees. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah. Yeah, bye-bye.